Hello. Let's talk about boundaries. Most of us are very aware of the boundary where we live, the front door. If we're living in a house, we are generally very aware of where our front yard, our backyard, where the side yards end. If we're in an apartment, we're very aware that the hallway is public property, that our boundary begins at the entryway. Physical boundaries we tend to have a good idea of. Emotional, social boundaries, not always as clear. And while we might be quite comfortable saying, hey, it's not okay for you to plant that tree in my yard, we might not be as comfortable with saying, wow, why would you just walk in my house? Boundaries matter. Yes, I'm talking physical, but also these emotional and social boundaries. They keep us, they give us our sense of where we're safe, where we will not have intrusion. They also do something else. They keep us from mucking about somewhere where we don't belong. For instance, if I have a fence, and I'm thinking of the first home that my husband and I had together where we raised our family. We had a scalloped fence in the backyard, 3 feet high at the low points, 5 at the high. It was very pretty. There were bushes and flowers inside, so it was a very neighbor-friendly fence, so to speak. The neighbors would come when we were in our yards and we would chat over the fence. At the same time, there was a gate. And people didn't just walk in the gate. Much of that might have been because we always had a big dog, but they would ask to come in. This gate kept my dog and all the visiting dogs and the children safe boundaries. They knew to stay within this area. When a ball would go into the neighbor's yard, the kids understood. You don't just go running there. That doesn't belong to us. We ask permission. So it's not just about keeping others out. It's about providing our safe, comfortable space. And it also helps us to be reminded, where do we go? Is that ours? Do we have the right? Do we have the permission? Excuse me, do we have permission to be there, to do whatever we want to do? Now, as I said, this is very physical. And sometimes those physical boundaries can be hard to maintain. You have the right, and in many cases, I feel like we have a personal obligation for self-care to take those boundaries a little further, to reinforce them. So, I live in a house. Part of my reinforcing my boundaries is that I lock my doors. Can someone break in? Absolutely. But they're not going to easily walk in. It matters. I began that many years ago because there's someone I care about very much who thought nothing of walking into my house, whatever time of day, for whatever reason. We had many conversations. I started out with saying, please don't do that. It makes me really uncomfortable. This is my home. And they chose to disregard this. It happened several times, and so I simply started keeping all the doors locked. It hurt their feelings. In fact, we had some conversations about that. They were very upset. Well, I am this connection to you. I have the right to come in here. No, you actually don't. And it makes me uncomfortable not knowing when someone might walk in. It made me feel unsafe because we lived in the back of the house and they would come through the front, not knowing who might hear, who might walk into a conversation or an event. Now, this might sound like a silly example, But it took an enormous amount of courage for me as a very young wife and mom to say to this person who was incredibly important to me, someone I respect, someone I love, someone who was older than me. So, do you feel the authority? It took an enormous amount of courage to say, this is not okay, and please respect my boundary. This happens in many instances in our life. Let's take it further. Dogs and children are always welcome in my house. They're some of my favorite. I do have rules. Children are not allowed to jump on the furniture. So, when someone comes into my home with their family, if a child is jumping up and down on the furniture, I try to be very respectful that I am not their parent. So my first position, my first step is to ask the parents to please not let this happen because it's not okay in my house. The children are absolutely welcome to play in the yard, to play in the house, as long as they're respectful, but jumping on the furniture is not okay in my house. The parent has the opportunity then to respect my boundary as I'm respecting theirs. It's not my child, it is my house. See how this can get a little murky? If they do something about it, no problem. If they choose not to, and I've had this happen many times, if they choose not to, I simply say, I understand that you've chosen not to take care of this, so you need to understand, or I ask you to understand this is my house and this is unacceptable. And I will then simply go have a conversation with the child. I've never had a problem with kids. They listen. If I say, please don't do this, it's really important to your Auntie Sandy or your friend or whoever I am to you, they're usually quite willing to be cooperative. One of the ways we can get people, that sounds manipulative, one of the ways to be more effective with this is to ask for cooperation. So I will generally say, wow, would you help me out with this? I would really appreciate it if we work together to keep an eye on little Timmy so that the furniture is not damaged. Not only that, and much more important, I want to make sure he's safe. Do you see how friendly and inviting that sounds? I'm asking them to work together with me to get the result that's important to me. When we invite, people are much more willing to be respectful. And when we thank them, oh, thanks so much. You have no idea how much more comfortable I am knowing that you understand I don't want Callie to get hurt. And so I'm going to ask her not to jump on my furniture. Thank you for helping me out with that. Most often, when we invite someone to help us out, as well as to understand our boundary, they do so. Now, there are many other sorts of intrusions that may be deliberate, that may not. Often, when we have someone that we've lost in a very tragic or unexpected way, the response from many people is, what happened? I want you to understand very clearly with it, whether this is the way that the one you love died, whether this is your financial situation. When someone asks a question, it's up to you to choose to answer or not. I welcome all questions. I've learned to be quite comfortable saying, that's not something I want to talk about. Thank you for caring. There are other times. For instance, again, one of my husband's sisters died. I got a call from somebody who knows us very well, but isn't involved in our life. There's not a strong emotional connection. They simply know us and have for a long time. And they called and they said, hi, I understand so-and-so died. What happened? This wasn't, how is your husband? This was the third sibling he had lost. He's the eldest of 10. They say 9. but it's 10 because one died as a newborn. They didn't ask Howard John's parents, are they okay? Again, this was the third child they buried. There was no concern. There was just wanting to know the details. And you knew the tone of voice that this was about, I want the dirt to pass it along. I had a choice. It was a very easy choice for me. But I could simply tell them, knowing that I was feeding this rumor mill that wanted to spread our stuff, but without compassion and feeling. Instead, I said, it's really personal, and we're really not ready to share things right now. That was the end of it. That was the end of it. This was personal, and it wasn't my stuff to share. I'm not incredibly close with my husband's family. My concern is my husband. I don't have the right to share those details of the way she died, certainly not with somebody who's not involved. People will ask the most amazing questions. I've had people ask, so, how about the life insurance? How much did you get? Again, listen to what's going on inside of you. Is this somebody asking that you're comfortable sharing this with? Is this someone who's asking for the purpose of supporting you and helping you? It's absolutely okay to say, it's none of your business. It's okay to ask, why are you asking me that? Sometimes there's a really good reason that might prompt us to respond. Other times, they just want to know. We do not owe anybody explanations. When we have personal details, perhaps we're having struggles with our partner, with a friendship, in our business, we have the right to share what's ours. We do not have an obligation to share what's ours. So here's another for instance. Within these classes, I use my husband and my sons as examples. It's limited to what they are comfortable with me sharing, and we've had conversations about it. There's much I will never share because it's not mine. Their details are theirs. If it's had an effect on me, if I'm involved, and if I have their permission, I will use these examples. Nothing more, because it's not mine to share. Much like our classes, we've asked them to be private and confidential so that we can truly build trust and intimacy of what's going on. And we might say, you might share very general aspects with others. So and so, I know someone who lost a son. I know someone who lost a parent. But the specifics are never something we share. My husband is never in this room when we have these conversations. He doesn't know what happens. Those are boundaries that we maintain so that we can build trust and intimacy. We have the right to share if we choose and if it's about us. We also have the right to say, is it okay if I ask you? Is it okay if I ask you? And then it gives the other person the opportunity to say yes or no. Boundaries are about us making the choice, yes or a no, to invite someone in or to say no thank you. Boundaries are also about us respecting them. And I'm not saying that we don't get involved and we don't care about, we don't share really personal and emotional, amazing things. We do when the time is right, when it's right for us and right for that person. Listen to how you feel inside. We get to make those decisions, each and every one of us, on a case-by-case basis. We have our roles, don't we? I'm a parent. I've been a dog owner most of my life. I'm not right now. Here's a boundary that I can talk to you about. There are some people a few doors down that have got a cute little dog. Cute little dog. And a few times, in fact, it happened again this morning, I watch an adult outside who watches the dog leave the yard and go down the block, back in the yards, and disappear between the houses. They can't see where the dog is going, but they watch it leave the yard and they don't call them. I know because I'm standing there where I can see and hear. It makes me really worried. It makes me really stressed because I worry that that dog will get hit by a car. At the same time, it's not my dog. Do you see where those boundaries are? So, the choice I've decided to make is that I watch that dog to make sure it's not disappearing between the houses. I have my dog bag of dog treats and a leash there because, yeah, I still dog sit for a lot of people. And eventually, when I see them coming outside, because usually in about 5 minutes, one of the adults will come out, I go out and I wave them down in the backyard and say, by the way, your little dog is here. I can still see them. They're safe. They need to come home. That's finding a boundary that I'm comfortable with. Everything in me wants to go with the treats and the leash and take that home and give them a good scolding and say, really? It's not that hard. This is how we do this. But that's not my business. I have no right to lecture them and scold them. They've not invited me to do so. And they wouldn't appreciate it. It would, in fact, cause real problems. Part of our boundaries is thinking about what will be the result of this action or this conversation. What is the end result I would prefer? I would prefer that that dog is safe. And these are nice people. They're nice people. We just have different feelings on how to take care of our dogs. The dog is in no way unsafe from anything I've seen. So this is the step I've taken so far. Does this make sense? These things happen in a very physical way often, but it's also about emotions. I do not want to overstep and tell someone else how to raise their children, how to handle their marriage, what they need to do at work, the way they drive down the road. I have no right to, unless it is a problem that might interfere. When somebody is in my yard, when a road is, when someone is driving in my lane, when something is happening that's a danger or a threat or intrusive, then it's absolutely reasonable to speak up and behave in a way that changes things. Our boundaries have to do with the way people speak with us, speak to us, and the way we have conversations with them. Setting a healthy boundary means it's not okay for someone to verbally abuse me, nor is it okay for me to verbally abuse them. Does that make sense? Respect and understanding goes a very long way. We're going to talk about this a lot this week because there's so many sorts of boundaries. I really encourage you to share your thoughts and your feelings about this. Let's have an active conversation because it matters. And I want to make sure that we get very, very comfortable with establishing boundaries that are healthy for us and being aware of boundaries for others. Boundaries are not about keeping ourselves isolated. They're about maintaining respect. Boundaries matter. Let's talk. Namaste.